Welcome, high society. Tonight we pull back the velvet curtain on a scandal that rocked the Hamptons, a betrayal so audacious it redefined the meaning of friendship and fidelity. Get ready because what you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a cautionary tale splashed across the tabloids and whispered in exclusive country clubs. This is the saga of Eliza Reid, a woman who had it all, lost everything, and then, in the most unexpected and spectacular way, took it all back. Buckle up, this is going to be a wild ride. Eliza Reid had always believed in fairy tales, perhaps because her own life for a time had felt like one. From humble beginnings in a small Midwestern town, she'd charmed her way into the heart of Marcus Thorne, a man whose name was synonymous with innovation, wealth, and power. Marcus, the scion of Thorne Industries, had built a tech empire from the ground up, a testament to his ruthless intellect and unwavering ambition. Their whirlwind romance had culminated in a wedding that graced the pages of Vogue, a lavish affair at his sprawling estate in Southampton. Eliza, with her radiant smile and genuine warmth, was the perfect counterpoint to Marcus's often stoic demeanor. She became Mrs. Thorne, the elegant hostess, the devoted wife, the woman who effortlessly navigated the shark-infested waters of New York's elite. For 10 years, their life together was a dazzling spectacle. Private jets whisked them to exotic locales, skiing in Verbier, yachting in the Mediterranean safaris in the Serengeti. Their penthouse in Manhattan offered panoramic views of the city skyline, a glittering testament to their success. Eliza managed their multiple residences with an iron fist in a velvet glove, her impeccable taste evident in every antique and every commissioned artwork. She was the envy of many, the silent strength behind Marcus's public persona. She genuinely loved him, or at least she loved the man she thought he was. Driven, yes, but also kind, thoughtful, and deeply committed to their shared future. They talked about children, about growing old together, about building a legacy that transcended mere financial success. Her closest confidant through it all was Amelia Hayes. Amelia, a striking blonde with an acerbic wit and an uncanny ability to make Eliza laugh even in the most stressful situations, had been Eliza's college roommate. Their friendship was a bedrock and anchor in the often superficial world Eliza now inhabited. Amelia was a struggling artist when Eliza met Marcus, but through Eliza's connections, she'd found gallery representation, and her career had slowly begun to blossom. Eliza never saw it as anything other than helping a friend. Amelia was practically family, a constant presence in their lives. She was at every dinner party, every holiday gathering, a regular fixture at their Hamptons estate, often staying for weeks at a time. Marcus even commissioned several of Amelia's pieces for his corporate offices, a gesture Eliza saw as generous and supportive. The first cracks in Eliza's perfect facade were almost imperceptible, like hairline fractures in an otherwise flawless diamond. Marcus, always busy, became increasingly distant. Late nights at the office stretched into entire weekends away, justified by urgent deals in Tokyo or London. His once attentive gaze now seemed to slide past her preoccupied. He'd dismiss her concerns with a wave of his hand, a terse comment about the pressures of his empire. Eliza, ever the understanding wife, tried to be patient. She told herself it was just a phase, the relentless demands of his world. She redoubled her efforts to make their home a sanctuary, to plan romantic dinners, to surprise him with thoughtful gestures. But his responses were increasingly perfunctory, his affection measured. Then came the little things, the anomalies that began to prickle at Eliza's subconscious. A faint, unfamiliar scent on his shirts that wasn't her perfume. A cryptic text message that flashed on his phone screen before he quickly pocketed it. The way he suddenly started taking calls in another room, his voice hushed. Eliza, a woman who prided herself on her intuition, felt a cold dread begin to creep into her heart. She dismissed it as paranoia, the insecurities of a wife whose husband was too successful, too attractive, too desirable for his own good. But the feeling persisted, a persistent hum of unease. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, the illusion shattered. Marcus had claimed to be in Boston for an emergency board meeting. Eliza, feeling restless, decided to visit her favorite boutique on Madison Avenue. As she stepped out of her chauffeured car, she saw them. Marcus Thorne, her husband of 10 years, walking hand in hand with Amelia Hayes, her best friend, into a discreet upscale jewelry store. The laughter that spilled from Amelia's lips, the way Marcus's arm was possessively wrapped around her waist, the undeniable intimacy of their posture. It hit Eliza like a physical blow. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The air left her lungs. Her meticulously constructed reality imploded in a single gut-wrenching moment. She stood there frozen, watching them emerge. Amelia's hand now adorned with a glittering diamond ring that dwarfed Eliza's own engagement ring. They shared a private joke, a tender kiss before disappearing into a waiting black car. Eliza didn't need to hear the words. The tableau spoke volumes. The betrayal was so profound, so absolute, it stole her breath. It wasn't just a husband's infidelity, it was a friend's treachery, a double cross that cut her to the very core of her being. The fairy tale had become a nightmare, and the princess was left bleeding on the pavement, her golden cage now an iron trap. That night, Marcus returned home whistling a cheerful tune. He found Eliza in the library, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. A printout of the jewelry store's online catalogue zoomed in on an engagement ring identical to the one on Amelia's finger, clutched in her trembling hand. The silence in the room was deafening, thick with unspoken accusations and the bitter taste of deceit. The confrontation was brutal, swift, and utterly devoid of remorse on Marcus's part. He admitted it all coolly, clinically, as if discussing a business merger. He was leaving her for Amelia. He had been for months. He even had the audacity to suggest that Eliza should have seen it coming, that they had simply grown apart. Eliza, reeling from the emotional devastation, found herself pushed to the brink. The divorce proceedings were a blur of legal jargon and public humiliation. Marcus, ever the master manipulator, leaked stories to the press, painting Eliza as a demanding, materialistic wife who had failed to appreciate his genius. The tabloid, sensing blood in the water, feasted on the scandal. "Thorne's Ice Queen dumped for artistic muse," screamed one headline. "Billionaire's new love from best friend to bride," declared another. Eliza, once a society darling, became a pariah, ostracized by many of her former friends who now flocked to Amelia, eager to curry favor with the new queen bee. Her financial settlement, while substantial by any normal standards, was a pittance compared to Marcus's vast fortune, deliberately structured to tie up her assets in long-term trusts and complex investments, leaving her with significant liquid capital, but still a fraction of what she deserved. He made sure she kept the Hamptons estate, a final cruel gesture, knowing the place was steeped in memories that would now only serve to torment her. The golden cage had been unlocked, but Eliza was left alone, bruised, broken, and with a hollow ache where her heart used to be. The world she had meticulously built had crumbled, leaving her with nothing but shattered dreams and the bitter taste of betrayal. And as the dust settled, a new emotion began to simmer beneath the surface of her grief, a quiet, simmering rage that would in time ignite a firestorm no one saw coming. The Hamptons estate, once a vibrant hub of glittering parties and intimate gatherings, now felt like a mausoleum. Eliza walked its hallowed halls, each room a ghost of happier times, each antique a reminder of a life that no longer existed. The sprawling gardens, meticulously manicured by a team of dedicated landscapers, offered no solace. Every rose seemed to mock her, every blooming hydrangea a testament to a beauty she no longer felt within herself. She was adrift, lost in a sea of grief and anger, the betrayal a constant throbbing wound. Days bled into weeks, weeks into months. Eliza barely ate, barely slept. Her usually impeccable appearance gave way to disheveled hair and haunted eyes. Her closest friends, the ones who hadn't abandoned her in the wake of the scandal, tried to reach out, but she pushed them away. She couldn't bear their pity, couldn't articulate the depth of her pain. How could she explain that the two people she had loved and trusted most in the world had conspired to dismantle her life? One crisp autumn morning, as Eliza sat by the window overlooking the tempestuous Atlantic, a small, almost imperceptible shift occurred within her. It wasn't a dramatic epiphany, but rather a slow, steady flicker of defiance. She saw her reflection in the glass, a pale, drawn woman, a shadow of her former self. And in that moment, a quiet voice inside her whispered, "Is this all you are now? A victim?" The thought was a jolt, a cold splash of water on her numb spirit. No. She was Eliza Reid, a woman who had built her own success before Marcus, a woman with intelligence, resilience, and a quiet strength that had been overshadowed by the dazzle of his world. She realized she had allowed herself to become defined by him, by their marriage, by the trappings of his wealth. Now, stripped of all, that she had a chance to redefine herself not as a victim, but as a survivor. The first step was small. She showered, something she hadn't done with care in days. She put on a clean dress, brushed her hair, and applied a touch of lipstick. Then she walked into the grand kitchen, once the domain of their private chef, and made herself a simple meal. It tasted like ash, but it was a start. Over the next few weeks, Eliza began the slow, arduous process of rebuilding. She hired a team of lawyers to re-examine her divorce settlement, dissecting every clause, every trust, every carefully hidden loophole Marcus had created. She met with financial advisors not just to manage her existing assets, but to strategize, to understand the intricate dance of the market. She was no longer content to be a passive recipient. She wanted to be an active player. She also started working out initially just long walks on the beach, the salty air a balm to her soul. Slowly, she progressed to intense Pilates sessions and power yoga. The physical exertion was a release away to channel the anger and frustration that still simmered beneath the surface. As her body grew stronger, so too did her mind. The fog of despair began to lift, replaced by a clarity of purpose. But the most significant change occurred when she stumbled upon a small, dusty box in the attic. Inside, tucked away amidst old photographs and forgotten mementos, was a collection of her grandmother's recipes. Her grandmother, a formidable woman who had run a successful bakery in their hometown, had instilled in Eliza a love for baking, a passion that had been relegated to a hobby once she entered Marcus's world. As Eliza leafed through the handwritten cards, the scent of cinnamon and vanilla seemed to waft from the pages, conjuring memories of warmth and comfort. A spark ignited. Eliza remembered the joy she used to find in creating, and the tactile satisfaction of flour on her hands, the alchemy of simple ingredients transforming into something delicious. She started baking tentatively at first, then, with increasing confidence. She experimented with old recipes, adding her own sophisticated twists, incorporating exotic flavors she'd discovered during her travels. The process was therapeutic, a quiet rebellion against the emptiness that had threatened to consume her. Word of her exquisite pastries, initially shared with her loyal staff and a handful of close friends, began to spread. "You have to try Eliza's macarons," whispered one friend at a charity luncheon. "Her tarts are divine," raved another. Eliza, hesitant at first, found herself considering a path she never imagined. Could this be more than just a hobby? Could it be a new beginning? Around this time, a mutual acquaintance, a shrewd businesswoman named Samantha Sam Miller, reached out to Eliza. Sam, a venture capitalist with a keen eye for untapped potential, had watched Eliza's public downfall with a mixture of sympathy and intrigue. She saw beyond the tabloid headlines, recognizing Eliza's innate intelligence and resilience. "Eliza," Sam said over a discreet lunch, "I know what you've been through. It's truly awful, but I also see something else. I see a woman with incredible taste, a discerning palate, and a drive that's been dormant for too long. Have you ever considered turning your baking into a business?" Eliza was stunned. The idea had been a whispered fantasy, too fragile to fully articulate. But hearing it from Sam, a woman who built empires, made it seem real tangible. They talked for hours, brainstorming concepts, discussing market niches, sketching out business plans on linen napkins. Sam saw the potential for a luxury bakery, not just a storefront, but an experience, a brand built on Eliza's impeccable style and exquisite creations. "We'll call it the Gilded Spoon," Sam proposed, "a nod to your past, but a symbol of your future." With Sam's guidance and a significant investment of her own capital, Eliza plunged into this new venture with a ferocity that surprised even herself. She leased a charming historic building in Sag Harbor, transforming it into a chic, minimalist space that exuded understated elegance. She meticulously sourced the finest ingredients, from rare Madagascan vanilla beans to artisanal French butter. She hired a small team of skilled pastry chefs and bakers who shared her passion for perfection. The launch of the Gilded Spoon was a quiet affair, deliberately low-key, avoiding the kind of fanfare that had once defined her life with Marcus. But word spread quickly. The quality of her confections was undeniable, the presentation exquisite. Society flocked to her door, not out of pity, but out of genuine appreciation for her artistry. The Gilded Spoon became the most exclusive bakery in the Hamptons, its treats gracing the tables of the most discerning hostesses. Eliza, once the discarded wife, was now a respected entrepreneur, her success entirely her own. As the Gilded Spoon flourished, Eliza also found unexpected solace in her work. The precise measurements, the delicate techniques, the focus required to create culinary masterpieces, it was all a distraction from the lingering pain, a channel for her renewed energy. She found a quiet satisfaction in building something from the ground up, something that was unequivocally hers. Yet, beneath the surface of her burgeoning success, a flicker of resentment remained. It wasn't a consuming fire, but a persistent ember. Marcus and Amelia were now the golden couple, their engagement announced with a splash, their upcoming wedding promising to be the social event of the year. Eliza would see glimpses of them in society magazines. Amelia, now sleek and polished, draped in designer clothes, her artistic career magically skyrocketing under Marcus's patronage. The injustice of it all, the blatant disregard for Eliza's feelings, occasionally flared. But Eliza had learned to channel that anger not into self-destruction, but into fuel. She realized that her greatest revenge wouldn't be a public spectacle or a bitter confrontation. It would be success achieved on her own terms, a quiet triumph that spoke louder than any shouted accusation. She was rebuilding her life not just for herself, but for something more, something that was still a secret, a delicate hope blossoming in the fertile ground of her newfound independence. The future, once a desolate wasteland, now held a tantalizing promise, a plan slowly forming in the quiet corners of her mind, a plan that would ultimately lead her back to Marcus and Amelia, but this time on her own formidable terms. Amidst the demanding schedule of building her empire, Eliza found herself facing a deeply personal and utterly unexpected revelation. For weeks, a subtle shift in her body had been gnawing at her. A persistent fatigue she attributed to long hours, a fleeting nausea she blamed on stress. But deep down, a whisper of intuition, a quiet certainty began to grow. One rainy afternoon, driven by an instinct she couldn't ignore, Eliza made a discreet appointment with a gynecologist in a neighboring town far from the prying eyes of Hampton's gossip. The results delivered in a gentle, almost apologetic tone by Dr. Evelyn Hayes, no relation to Amelia, thankfully hit Eliza like a tidal wave. She was pregnant. Not just pregnant, but carrying multiples. Her mind reeled. Quadruplets. The words echoed in the sterile examination room, an improbable, miraculous, and terrifying pronouncement. In the immediate aftermath, Eliza was consumed by a kaleidoscope of emotions. Joy, profound and overwhelming, surged through her. A sense of awe at the miracle unfolding within her. But intertwined with this elation was a piercing fear. She was alone, truly alone. No partner, no husband, just herself and 4 tiny lives utterly dependent on her. The image of Marcus, his cold dismissal, his swift betrayal flashed before her eyes. The idea of bringing 4 children into the world without a stable, loving co-parent was daunting, to say the least. Her first instinct was to call Sam. Sam, ever the pragmatist, listened intently, her usual sharp wit softened by genuine concern. Eliza, this is a lot, but you are strong, and you are not alone. We will figure this out together. Sam's unwavering support was a lifeline, a reminder that Eliza had built a new, loyal network around her. The next challenge was how to navigate this monumental news publicly. Eliza, fiercely protective of her privacy and still smarting from the tabloid frenzy of her divorce, decided to keep her pregnancy a closely guarded secret. She entrusted only Sam and her most trusted assistants with the truth. Her expanding belly was cleverly concealed with flowing dresses and strategically placed layers explained away by a new relaxed style as the Gilded Spoon's success continued to grow. She became a master of deflection, a magician of misdirection. The pregnancy, especially with quadruplets, was demanding. Morning sickness, once fleeting, became a constant companion. The fatigue was relentless. Yet Eliza found a strength she never knew she possessed. Every kick, every flutter, every ultrasound image of her growing babies fueled her determination. They were her purpose now, her reason to fight her ultimate victory. She meticulously planned every detail of their arrival. A discreet maternity nurse was hired, a trusted pediatrician consulted. She renovated a wing of the Hamptons estate, transforming it into a luxurious yet practical nursery fit for 4. The whispers of society, still focused on Marcus and Amelia's impending nuptials, provided the perfect smokescreen. No one suspected that Eliza Reed, the Ice Queen, who had been so publicly discarded, was about to embark on the most profound journey of her life. Meanwhile, Marcus and Amelia's wedding preparations were in full swing. Society pages were awash with details: the exclusive island resort they had booked in the Caribbean, the designer gown Amelia would wear, the celebrity guest list. Their love story, once a scandalous whisper, was now being celebrated as a triumph of true love over a stifling marriage. Eliza would see the glossy photos, the beaming faces, and a familiar ache would twist in her gut. But the pain was different now. It was no longer just heartbreak. It was a steely resolve, a quiet determination to protect her unborn children from the very man who had so carelessly broken her heart. As her due date approached, Eliza decided to temporarily retreat from public life, citing exhaustion from expanding the business. She secluded herself at the estate, surrounded by her small, loyal team, eagerly awaiting the arrival of her children. The birth, complicated but ultimately successful, brought 4 healthy babies into the world. 3 girls, Charlotte, Isabella, and Genevieve, and 1 boy, Theodore. Eliza, holding them for the first time, felt an outpouring of love so vast, so encompassing, it eclipsed all the pain and betrayal of the past. These tiny, perfect beings were her future, her legacy, her greatest achievement. The early months were a blur of sleepless nights, countless feedings, and an overwhelming surge of maternal devotion. Eliza, despite her wealth and the help she employed, was a hands-on mother determined to nurture her children herself. She sang them lullabies, read them stories, and reveled in every coo and gurgle. The Gilded Spoon continued to thrive under Sam's watchful eye and Eliza's remote guidance, but her babies were her primary focus. As the quadruplets approached their first birthday, robust and full of vibrant energy, a date began to loom large in Eliza's mind: the day of Marcus and Amelia's wedding. The invitations had gone out months ago, a stark reminder of the culmination of their betrayal. Eliza had initially planned to ignore it to spend the day showering her children with love far from the celebratory din. But as the date drew closer, a different idea began to take root. A daring, audacious plan born not of malice, but of a fierce desire to reclaim her narrative, to stand tall and undeniably present in a world that had tried to erase her. She discussed it with Sam, laying out her vision with a calm precision that belied the audacity of the scheme. Sam, after an initial gasp of disbelief, broke into a wide, approving grin. "Eliza Reed," she declared, "you are truly magnificent. This is not just revenge, it's a masterpiece." The plan was simple, yet brilliant in its execution. It wasn't about causing a scene, not about shouting accusations or making a public spectacle of herself. It was about presence, about showing up, about making an undeniable statement without uttering a single word. It was about revealing her truth, her ultimate triumph, in the most unexpected and unforgettable way possible. The world had seen her fall, had witnessed her public humiliation. Now they would see her rise, not just as a successful businesswoman, but as a formidable mother. A woman who had quietly, powerfully built a new life, a new family from the ashes of her old one. The stage was set, the players in position. The grand finale was about to unfold. The day of Marcus Thorne and Amelia Hayes' wedding dawned crisp and clear in the Caribbean. The chosen resort, a secluded paradise of white sand beaches and swaying palm trees, buzzed with the excitement of high society's most anticipated event of the year. Every detail was meticulously planned, from the rare orchids flown in from Thailand to the bespoke designer gown Amelia would wear, a creation that had been featured in Bridal Vogue. Guests, a who's who of international finance, tech and entertainment, arrived on private jets, their faces alight with anticipation. The air was thick with the scent of tropical blooms and expensive champagne, a shimmering tableau of wealth and privilege. Marcus, looking impeccably handsome in a custom-tailored linen suit, moved through the pre-ceremony, mingling with a confident ease, a satisfied smirk playing on his lips. He was at the pinnacle of his life, financially richer than ever, about to marry the woman he claimed was his soulmate, and having seemingly eradicated all traces of his past marriage. Amelia, radiant and glowing, was the picture of a blushing bride, her once struggling artistic career now flourishing under the golden touch of her soon-to-be husband. They were the perfect power couple, their narrative carefully crafted for public consumption, a love that overcame obstacles, a testament to destiny. Back in the Hamptons, Eliza was a picture of serene composure, a stark contrast to the storm that had raged within her for the past year. Her quadruplets, now nearly a year old, were dressed in adorable custom-made ivory outfits, soft linen for the girls' dresses, a tiny suit for Theodore, all designed to be comfortable yet elegant. Eliza herself wore a stunning, understated ivory silk dress, its flowing lines expertly concealing any lingering traces of her recent pregnancy, her hair styled in soft waves, her makeup minimal but flawless. She exuded an aura of quiet power, a woman utterly at peace with herself and her formidable purpose. The plan was set. Not for disruption, not for confrontation, simply for presence, for undeniable, unforgettable presence. As the ceremony was about to begin, the guests were ushered towards the breathtaking oceanfront gazebo adorned with thousands of white roses. The soft strains of a string quartet filled the air. Marcus stood at the altar, a confident smile fixed on his face, his eyes scanning the gathering for Amelia. The moment was perfect cinematic, exactly as he had orchestrated it. Then a subtle shift occurred. A ripple of whispers began to spread through the assembled guests. Heads turned not towards the aisle where Amelia was due to appear, but towards the main entrance of the resort, usually reserved for arrivals. A hush fell over the crowd, a collective intake of breath. A sleek, gleaming black limousine glided silently into view, pulling up precisely at the edge of the red carpet leading to the gazebo. It wasn't just any limousine. It was the kind reserved for heads of state or A-list celebrities exuding an undeniable aura of importance. The uniformed chauffeur, looking impeccably professional, stepped out and opened the rear door. And then she emerged, Eliza Reed. She stepped out with an elegance that defied description, her ivory silk dress shimmering softly in the Caribbean sun. She moved with a confidence that seemed to anchor the very air around her. Her gaze was direct, unwavering, sweeping across the stunned faces of the guests, many of whom she had once called friends. Her presence alone would have been enough to cause a sensation to halt the proceedings. But Eliza was not alone. As she turned, the chauffeur carefully helped two nannies, also impeccably dressed, to alight from the limousine. And in their arms, nestled against their chests, were two of her quadruplets, tiny bundles of ivory and innocence. Then Eliza herself reached back into the car and with a gentle, practiced ease lifted the other two, four babies. Identical in their exquisite outfits, wide-eyed and curious, nestled safely in the arms of their formidable mother and her trusted companions. The collective gasp from the guests was almost audible. A wave of disbelief, then shock, then a flurry of whispered exclamations swept through the gathering. Flashbulbs from hidden paparazzi, always lurking at such events, began to pop, capturing the surreal scene. Marcus, standing at the altar, his triumphant smile frozen on his face, watched in horror as Eliza, holding two of his children, his own flesh and blood, began to slowly, deliberately walk down the red carpet. His face drained of color, his jaw clenched, his carefully constructed composure crumbling before the eyes of everyone he knew. The shock was so profound, so utterly unexpected, it rendered him speechless. Amelia, who had just appeared at the beginning of the aisle, resplendent in her designer gown, her face alight with bridal bliss, saw Eliza and the babies, and her smile vanished. Her eyes widened in a mixture of horror and dawning comprehension. The color drained from her face, her carefully applied makeup suddenly stark against her pallor. The moment she had dreamed of the culmination of her manipulative scheme was being irrevocably hijacked by the undeniable presence of Eliza and four undeniable truths. Eliza didn't say a word. She didn't make a scene. She simply walked with calm dignity, her head held high, the four babies a testament to a truth Marcus had tried to erase, a future he had unwittingly helped create. She stopped halfway down the aisle, just close enough for everyone to see, to witness. She didn't look at Marcus or Amelia directly, her gaze sweeping over the guests, a silent, powerful declaration. She was here. She was thriving. And these children, her children, were living proof of a new life, a new beginning born from the very ashes of his betrayal. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the gentle cooing of one of the babies and the distant lapping of waves. It was a silence filled with unspoken questions, with dawning realization, with the profound shock of an event that defied all expectations. The perfect wedding, the carefully curated narrative, had just been irrevocably shattered by the uninvited guest and her four very persuasive arguments. The wedding ceremony, needless to say, did not proceed as planned. The arrival of Liza and the Quadruplets had thrown the entire event into disarray. Guests, a mixture of awe and scandal etched on their faces, murmured amongst themselves. Some pointed, some gasped, others pulled out their phones discreetly, or not so discreetly, taking photos and videos of the unfolding drama. Marcus, still frozen at the altar, looked as though he had seen a ghost. Amelia, utterly mortified, finally gathered herself and retreated from the aisle, her dream wedding dissolving before her eyes. Eliza, having made her powerful, silent statement, turned gracefully, and with her nannies began to walk back towards the waiting limousine. She didn't linger, didn't gloat. Her mission was accomplished. As she reached the car, she finally allowed her gaze to briefly meet Marcus's. There was no anger, no triumph, just a quiet, profound understanding of the truth that now stood between them, undeniable and irrefutable. It was a gaze that said, "You chose your path and I chose mine, and this is my path." The limousine door closed silently, and the sleek black vehicle glided away, leaving behind a whirlwind of speculation, shock, and utter chaos. Within minutes, the news exploded. The paparazzi, initially focused on the celebrity guests, had captured every frame of Eliza's dramatic entrance. Social media accounts, typically filled with curated posts of happy couples and lavish events, were now dominated by blurry photos and frantic captions. Billionaire's ex crashes wedding with quadruplets. Marcus Thorne's secret babies revealed. Amelia Hayes' wedding nightmare. The story went viral faster than any tech launch Marcus had ever orchestrated. Back at the estate, Eliza calmly settled her babies into their car seats. She ensured they were comfortable and fed, seemingly unfazed by the global sensation she had just ignited. Sam, who had been orchestrating the media response from afar, called, her voice buzzing with a mixture of excitement and awe. "Eliza, you broke the internet. It's everywhere. Marcus's PR team is in full damage control mode, but it's too late. The world knows." Eliza simply smiled, a genuine, serene smile. "Good," she said softly. "The truth often is. Now let's get these little ones home." The aftermath for Marcus and Amelia was a public relations nightmare of epic proportions. Their carefully crafted narrative of true love was shattered, replaced by accusations of infidelity, abandonment, and deceit. Marcus's business reputation, usually unassailable, took a significant hit as investors questioned his judgment and ethics. Thorne Industries' stock dipped and angry shareholders demanded answers. Amelia's artistic career, which had been artificially inflated by Marcus's connections, suddenly found itself under intense scrutiny. Galleries began to distance themselves and commissions evaporated. She was no longer seen as a talented artist, but as a conniving opportunist, the woman who betrayed her best friend. The social circles that had once embraced her now ostracized her whispers of homewrecker and traitor, following her everywhere. Marcus, enraged and humiliated, immediately launched a legal assault, attempting to demand paternity tests and gain custody, or at least control, over the quadruplets. But Eliza was prepared. She had meticulously documented every step of her pregnancy, every doctor's visit, every ultrasound. Her legal team, formidable and well-funded thanks to her success with the Gilded Spoon, swiftly countered his moves. The paternity tests, when conducted, confirmed what Eliza already knew: Marcus Thorne was indeed the biological father of Charlotte, Isabella, Genevieve, and Theodore. The undeniable scientific proof made his attempts at denial futile. The court proceedings, though private, became a feeding frenzy for the media. Eliza, through her lawyers, and a carefully managed public statement, revealed the full truth: that Marcus had abandoned her while she was unknowingly pregnant, that he had callously dismissed her and their marriage for Amelia. She did not seek alimony or further financial gain. Her focus was solely on securing her children's well-being and acknowledging their parentage. She simply wanted Marcus to acknowledge his responsibility, both legally and morally. The judge, clearly swayed by Eliza's dignified demeanor and the irrefutable evidence, granted Eliza full custody of the children, with Marcus having supervised visitation rights, a severe blow to his pride and his carefully constructed image as a benevolent patriarch. He was ordered to pay substantial child support, not just for the quadruplets, but also for the extensive security education and specialized care their unique situation required. The court effectively stripped him of the illusion of control he had always so desperately clung to. The public narrative shifted dramatically. Eliza, once the scorned ex-wife, was now hailed as a survivor, a strong, independent woman who had overcome immense adversity and built a new life for herself and her children. The Gilded Spoon became even more successful, its sales soaring as people rallied behind Eliza. She even launched a line of organic baby food, the Gilded Spoons for Little Ones, which quickly became a bestseller. Amelia, on the other hand, virtually disappeared from public life. Her betrayal was too profound, her fall from grace too spectacular. The weight of her actions, coupled with the public condemnation, proved too much. Their relationship, built on deceit, quickly crumbled under the intense pressure. Marcus, seeing his empire threatened and his reputation in tatters, began to resent Amelia, blaming her for the catastrophic fallout. The fairy tale they had so carefully constructed for themselves dissolved into a bitter, acrimonious mess. As for Eliza, she found a profound peace. Her life was no longer defined by Marcus Thorne, but by her children, by her thriving business, and by her own quiet strength. She had not sought revenge out of malice, but out of a need for truth, for justice, and for the undeniable recognition of her new reality. She had transformed pain into power, betrayal into purpose. The ultimate victory wasn't just in exposing Marcus and Amelia, but in reclaiming her own narrative, in forging a new path, and in building a beautiful, fulfilling life for herself and her 4 precious miracles. The saga of Eliza Reid had come full circle, not with a bang, but with the quiet, powerful strength of a woman who had found her true worth and had brought 4 beautiful lives into the world as a testament to her unwavering resilience. The years that followed Marcus and Amelia's disastrous non-wedding were a testament to Eliza's unwavering resilience and astute business acumen. The initial media frenzy eventually subsided, but the public's fascination with Eliza and her quadruplets remained. She handled it all with grace and dignity, carefully curating her public image to focus on her thriving business and her devotion to her children, rather than dwelling on past grievances. She gave select interviews, always emphasizing the importance of independence, self-worth, and the joy of motherhood. The Gilded Spoon continued its meteoric rise. What began as a local Hamptons bakery expanded into a national luxury brand. Eliza, with Sam Miller's continued guidance, strategically opened flagship stores in major cities like New York, Los Angeles, and Miami. Her organic baby food line, the Gilded Spoons for Little Ones, became a household name trusted by discerning parents who admired Eliza's story and her commitment to quality. She launched cookbooks, hosted cooking shows, and even started a foundation dedicated to supporting single mothers pursuing entrepreneurship. Eliza Reid was no longer just Marcus Thorne's ex-wife. She was a formidable entrepreneur, a celebrated author, and a respected philanthropist in her own right. Her Hamptons estate, once a painful reminder of her past, was transformed into a bustling, joyful home. Charlotte, Isabella, Genevieve, and Theodore grew into vibrant, intelligent children, each with their own distinct personality, but all sharing their mother's quiet determination and radiant smile. Eliza ensured they had a stable, loving environment shielded from the worst of the media's attention, but also taught them the importance of kindness, integrity, and hard work. She was a devoted mother, juggling board meetings with bedtime stories, culinary creations with school plays. Marcus Thorne, on the other hand, found himself in a slow, agonizing decline. His reputation never fully recovered from the wedding scandal. The public saw him as a man who abandoned his pregnant wife and their children, a perception that severely damaged his carefully cultivated image as a brilliant ethical business leader. Thorne Industries, while still a powerful entity, lost some of its luster, struggling to regain investor confidence. Strategic partnerships dissolved, and key talent left for competitors. He and Amelia eventually married in a quiet, unceremonious ceremony, a far cry from the lavish affair they had originally planned. Their marriage, however, was fraught with resentment and recrimination, quickly devolving into a strained, unhappy coexistence. Amelia, her artistic career a distant memory, became increasingly isolated and bitter, her dreams of grandeur shattered. Eliza maintained a strictly professional relationship with Marcus, mediated by their lawyers regarding the children. He had his supervised visitations, which he often approached with a detached, almost uncomfortable air. The children, while polite, never truly warmed to him. They saw Eliza as their primary parent, their rock, the person who had always been there for them. Marcus, for all his wealth, remained a peripheral figure in their lives, a man who, by his own choices, had missed out on the most precious years of their childhood. Years passed. The Quadruplets, now teenagers, were flourishing. Charlotte, artistic and compassionate, showed an interest in design, often sketching out ideas for the Gilded Spoon's new product lines. Isabella, sharp and analytical, displayed a knack for finance, occasionally surprising Eliza with her insightful questions about market trends. Genevieve, the most adventurous, dreamed of traveling the world and exploring different cultures. Theodore, the quiet leader, was an avid reader and budding writer, often crafting intricate stories in his spare time. Eliza looked at them, these four remarkable individuals, and knew that her greatest triumph wasn't just her business success, but the beautiful, loving family she had built from the ashes of betrayal. One late autumn evening, as Eliza sat on the veranda of her estate watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery hues, she received an unexpected email. It was from Marcus. It wasn't a legal document, nor a demand for visitation. It was a simple, short message devoid of his usual arrogance. Eliza, it read. I saw Theodore's essay in the school newsletter. It was truly brilliant. I regret so much. I hope you and the children are well. Eliza read the email, a faint, almost imperceptible pang of something she couldn't quite name. Not pity, not forgiveness, but a distant echo of a past long gone. She didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Her life was full, vibrant, and rich in ways Marcus could never comprehend. His regret, she knew, was not for her, but for what he had lost, a genuine connection with his children. A life of true purpose beyond the pursuit of wealth. Eliza closed her laptop, a peaceful smile gracing her lips. She had not only survived, she had thrived. She had not only rebuilt her life, she had redefined it on her own terms with strength, grace, and an unwavering commitment to the love that truly mattered. The golden cage was a distant memory replaced by a boundless sky, and she, Eliza Reid, was soaring. Years turned into decades. The Quadruplets graduated from prestigious universities, each embarking on their own successful paths. Charlotte, with a degree in design and business, joined the Gilded Spoon, bringing a fresh, innovative vision to the brand. Isabella, armed with an MBA, became a formidable force in the financial world, eventually managing her mother's extensive portfolio and expanding it exponentially. Genevieve, after years of travel and humanitarian work, established her own non-profit dedicated to sustainable development in underserved communities, often collaborating with the Gilded Spoon on charitable initiatives. Theodore, true to his early passion, became a celebrated author, his novels exploring themes of resilience, family, and the complexities of human relationships, often subtly drawing inspiration from his unique upbringing. Eliza, now a revered figure in both the business and philanthropic worlds, remained the matriarch, her wisdom and grace guiding her expanding empire and her beloved family. She stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the Gilded Spoon, entrusting much of it to Charlotte and a new generation of talented leaders. She dedicated more of her time to her foundation, mentoring young women entrepreneurs and advocating for social causes. Her Hamptons estate, still her cherished home, became a vibrant hub for family gatherings filled with the laughter of her grandchildren, a testament to the enduring love she had cultivated. Marcus Thorne, a shadow of his former self, eventually retired from Thorne Industries, his legacy forever tainted by the scandal. He and Amelia's marriage had ultimately ended in a quiet, undignified divorce. Amelia, long forgotten by the society she had once yearned to conquer, lived a solitary life. Her artistic dreams unfulfilled, her betrayal a heavy burden she carried alone. Marcus, increasingly isolated, occasionally sought to connect with his adult children, but the years of absence had created an unbridgeable chasm. He saw their successes from afar, a poignant reminder of the vibrant family he had so carelessly discarded. One particularly poignant moment occurred at a prestigious awards ceremony, where Eliza was being honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award for her entrepreneurial success and philanthropic contributions. Her quadruplets, now distinguished adults, stood proudly by her side. As Eliza, elegant and radiant, accepted the award, she looked out at the audience, her gaze sweeping past countless familiar faces, and then she saw him. Marcus Thorne, seated discreetly in the back, a solitary figure, his once brilliant eyes now shadowed with regret and perhaps a flicker of admiration. Eliza, in her acceptance speech, spoke not of past hurts or betrayals, but of the transformative power of resilience, the strength found in unexpected beginnings, and the profound joy of building a life rooted in love and purpose. She spoke of her children, her voice filled with an unmistakable maternal pride. She concluded, her voice clear and strong, are my greatest achievement, my enduring legacy. They taught me that true wealth is not measured in material possessions, but in the richness of the human spirit, in the bonds of family, and in the courage to create your own destiny. As the audience erupted in a standing ovation, Eliza's eyes briefly met Marcus's again. This time there was no anger, no pain, just a quiet acknowledgement of shared history and the undeniable truth that their paths had diverged completely, one leading to a life of fulfillment and profound happiness, the other to a quiet, solitary regret. Eliza Reid had truly come full circle. She was a woman who had faced unimaginable betrayal and emerged not just intact, but triumphant. She had transformed heartbreak into purpose, humiliation into inspiration. Her story, once a scandal whispered in hushed tones, had become an anthem of resilience, a powerful testament to the fact that even from the deepest valleys of despair, one can rise, rebuild, and redefine one's entire world. Her legacy was not just her successful empire, but the 4 extraordinary lives she had nurtured, the countless women she had inspired, and the enduring power of a mother's unwavering love. And so we close the book on Eliza Reid's incredible journey. From the gilded cage of betrayal to the boundless freedom of self-made success and unwavering motherhood, her story is more than just a drama. It's a blueprint for resilience. Eliza didn't just survive. She thrived, turning the ultimate betrayal into her ultimate triumph. Her refusal to be a victim, her quiet strength in building an empire and raising 4 incredible children serves as a powerful reminder for us all. If Eliza can turn heartbreak into a legacy, imagine what you can achieve. If this story resonated with you, if it sparked a flicker of inspiration, then please hit that like button, share this incredible tale with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more stories of extraordinary resilience and unexpected turns. Don't miss out on our next deep dive into the lives that shape our world. Until next time, stay strong, stay inspired, and never underestimate the power of your own comeback.
What would you do if the man who shattered your heart, the man who called you an anchor, holding him back, decided to get married on the one day of the year that was sacred to you both? For Aurora Monroe, that day was October 12th, her wedding anniversary. The invitation wasn't just an insult, it was a declaration of war on her memory. But Declan Peterson made a fatal miscalculation. He assumed his ex-wife was still the broken woman he'd left behind. He had no idea she was about to RSVP in a way that would not only crash his wedding, but shatter his entire carefully constructed new world. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, nestled between a catalogue for Italian leather goods and a bill from the architectural firm. It was thick, creamy cardstock, the kind that whispers of expense and occasion. Aurora Monroe ran a manicured finger over the embossed lettering, her heart giving a painful, familiar lurch. Mr. and Mrs. Gerald Miller request the pleasure of your company at the marriage of their daughter Sophie Miller to Mr. Declan Peterson. And there at the bottom, the date that felt like a deliberate poisoned dart, Saturday the 12th of October. Their anniversary. 5 years they had been married. 10 years they had been together. October 12th wasn't just a date. It was a cornerstone of her life, a day she had once believed was etched into the stars. Even after the divorce, a messy, brutal affair that had flayed her soul raw. The date remained sacrosanct. She'd spend it quietly, sometimes with her sister, sometimes alone, a day of somber reflection on the woman she used to be. Now, Declan was taking that too. He wasn't just moving on. He was bulldozing the ruins of their shared history to build his new life on top of them. A bitter laugh escaped her lips, sounding foreign in the minimalist quiet of her penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park. Of course he was. It was so quintessentially Declan, grandiose, selfish, and utterly thoughtless. The divorce had been 2 years ago. The words he'd used still echoed in her mind during her weaker moments. "You're not ambitious enough, Aurora. You're comfortable. You're an anchor, and I'm a ship meant for the open sea." He had made her feel small, as if her dreams of building her interior design firm brick by painstaking brick were quaint hobbies compared to his vague, bombastic ambitions in the world of finance. He'd painted her as the reason his career hadn't skyrocketed, the quiet domestic weight holding back his ascent. The irony was so thick she could choke on it. In the 2 years since he'd cut the anchor, her firm, Monroe Interiors, had exploded. She'd landed a feature in Architectural Digest, secured contracts with 2 boutique hotel chains, and was now in negotiations to design a series of luxury lofts in Dubai. She wasn't just successful. She was thriving in a way she never could have when a part of her energy was constantly being diverted to soothe his fragile ego. She dropped the invitation on the marble island, the sharp clack echoing in the room. Her phone buzzed. It was a picture message from Maxwell. He was standing on a tarmac in Geneva, a breathtaking backdrop of the Swiss Alps behind him, grinning into the camera. The text read, "Closed the deal. The prototype is officially ours. Celebrating with fondue. Wish you were here. Home tomorrow. J." A genuine smile touched Aurora's lips, the first one since opening the mail. Maxwell Lancaster, the man who had walked into her life 6 months ago like a calm, steady sunrise after a long, violent storm. He was a tech billionaire, a fact he rarely mentioned. And that was the least interesting thing about him. He was kind, fiercely intelligent, and looked at her not as an anchor, but as the sea itself, vast, powerful, and beautiful. He celebrated her successes with more enthusiasm than she did, listening for hours as she detailed fabric swatches and lighting schematics. With him, she felt seen, not just observed. She picked up the invitation again, the anger returning, but this time it was different. It wasn't the hollow ache of a victim. It was a cold, clarifying fire. Declan didn't know who she was anymore. He still saw her as the woman who cried for a week after he left, the woman who had to sell their shared brownstone because she couldn't bear the memories. He was flaunting his new life, his new bride, Sophie Miller, a socialite whose father owned half of Wall Street. Aurora noted with a cynical pang on their day, assuming she would shrink wounded into the shadows. He was assuming she was still anchored in their past. That night she couldn't sleep. She paced the length of her apartment, the glittering panorama of New York City, a silent witness to her turmoil. The city had been their playground. They'd had their first date at a small jazz club in the village. He'd proposed on the Bow Bridge in Central Park on a crisp autumn afternoon, just like this one. His ghost was everywhere. For 2 years, she had worked to exorcise him. She'd poured her pain, her anger, her resilience into her work, and it had paid off. She had built a fortress around her heart with steel and glass and success. But this invitation was a battering ram threatening to breach the walls. Going was out of the question. It was masochistic. It was handing Declan the victory, showing up alone, a spectre at his feast. It would confirm every condescending, pitying glance from his family and friends who had always thought he was too good for her. Not going felt like defeat. It felt like hiding. It felt like letting him have the final say on what October 12th meant. It would be his wedding day forever. The thought was unbearable. She found herself in her home office, scrolling through the social media profile of Sophie Miller. It was a curated gallery of perfection. Skiing in Aspen, yachting in Monaco, charity galas at the Met. Sophie was blonde, beautiful, and radiated the effortless confidence of someone who had never wanted for anything. In one photo, Declan stood beside her, his arm wrapped possessively around her waist. He wore a tailored suit, a smug, triumphant smile on his face. He looked like he'd won. Aurora's finger hovered over a picture of the engaged couple, a professionally shot photo with Sophie's enormous diamond ring prominently displayed. The caption penned by Sophie read, "I can't wait to marry my king and build our empire together. Declan Peterson, you are my everything." His empire, Aurora thought, with a humorless smile. Declan had always talked about his empire, a vague and glorious future that was always just around the corner, always impeded by some external factor, the market, his boss, his supposedly unsupportive wife. The fire within her burned hotter. It wasn't about the man anymore. She felt nothing for Declan but a dull, clinical revulsion. It was about the narrative. He had written the story of their ending, casting her as the villain, the dead weight. He was now writing a new story, a triumphant sequel on the very day that defined their shared history. She would not allow it. She would not be a footnote in the story of Declan Peterson. When Maxwell's car pulled up to her building the next evening, she was waiting. He stepped out, a tall, commanding presence, in a simple grey sweater and jeans that probably cost more than her first car. He enveloped her in a hug, his scent a comforting mix of expensive cologne and the clean, crisp air of the Alps still clinging to his coat. "You seem tense," he said, his perceptive blue eyes searching hers. "Everything okay?" Inside, she handed him the invitation. He read it, his expression hardening almost imperceptibly. He looked from the cardstock to the date, then back to her face. He saw the storm in her eyes. "The 12th, he said, his voice low, "of all the days in the year." "It's a power move," Aurora said, her voice tight. "It's a final twist of the knife to make sure I know he won." "And what do you want to do about it?" Maxwell asked. He didn't offer platitudes. He didn't tell her to ignore it or that Declan wasn't worth her energy. He knew she was past that. This was something different. "I was going to throw it away. I was going to book a spa day, fly to Paris, anything to pretend it isn't happening," she admitted. "But it feels like letting him win. It feels like I'm still letting him dictate my life, even in his absence." She looked at Maxwell, at his calm, unwavering face. "He thinks I'm still the person he left. He thinks I'm alone, struggling, a comfortable little designer. He has no idea who I am now." A slow smile spread across Maxwell's face. It was the smile he got when he was about to solve a complex coding problem or outmaneuver a corporate rival. So he said, his eyes glinting with a shared spark of rebellion, "Why don't we show him the idea once spoken aloud took on a life of its own? It shifted from a wild, vengeful fantasy into a tangible, strategic plan." Maxwell's question, "Why don't we show him?" wasn't just rhetorical. It was an offer, a key to a door Aurora hadn't even realized was there. "What do you mean, show him?" she asked, a tremor of excitement running through her. "Crash his wedding, Maxwell. That's insane. It's dramatic and petty. Is it? He countered, leaning against the kitchen island, the picture of calm audacity. Or is it simply correcting a narrative? He's telling a story about you to his new family, to his friends, to himself. A story where you were the weak link. You have the opportunity to present a revised edition. He picked up the invitation again. Blackwood Manor. Quaint, old money aesthetic. An hour north of the city. We could drive. He paused, a theatrical glint in his eye. Or we could make an entrance that's a little less terrestrial. Aurora's heart started beating faster. She knew what he was suggesting. Maxwell owned a fleet of private aircraft through a subsidiary of his company, Lancaster Aerospace. To him, a jet was like a car. You want to fly to his wedding? She breathed. The manor has a heliport, but it's small, barely fit for a Bell 429. Maxwell mused, already scrolling on his phone. However, there's a private airfield less than 10 miles away. Ample runway for the G700. We could be there wheels down in under 20 minutes from Teterboro. The Gulfstream G700. Maxwell's newest acquisition, a flying masterpiece of engineering and luxury that he often called his sky office. The thought was so audacious, so utterly beyond the realm of anything Declan could possibly conceive of, that Aurora laughed, a real deep laugh that broke the tension in her chest. He would have a complete and total meltdown, she said, the image flashing in her mind. That's a potential side effect, Maxwell said, with a straight face. But that's not the point. The point, Aurora, is for you to walk into that place, not as Declan Peterson's sad ex-wife, but as Aurora Monroe, the woman you are today. Successful, happy, and with a man who sees you as a supernova, not an anchor. It's not about revenge. It's about closure, on your terms. His words sliced through her remaining hesitation. He was right. This wasn't about being petty. It was about reclaiming her own story. It was about showing up for herself, proving to the one person who mattered her that the ghosts of the past had no power. Okay, she said the word, feeling momentous. Let's do it. The next 10 days were a whirlwind of focused preparation. It felt less like planning a party crash and more like a military operation, with Maxwell as the general and Aurora as the commander on the ground. First, the dress. Aurora knew it couldn't be just any dress. It had to be a statement. She didn't want a revenge dress in the classic sense, not something overtly sexy or attention-seeking. She needed something that spoke of power, elegance, and untouchable grace. She called in a favor with a designer friend in Milan, a woman whose couture gowns were usually reserved for red carpets and royalty. She explained the situation vaguely at first. I have an event. I need to make an impression. What kind of impression, the designer Isabella had asked over a video call. Like I own the world, but I'm too busy to be bothered with the paperwork, Aurora replied. Isabella had cackled with delight. Say no more, my darling. I have the perfect creation. 3 days later, a custom-fitted gown arrived by courier. It was a masterpiece of midnight blue silk that seemed to drink the light. It was cut with architectural precision, a high neckline, long sleeves, and a column silhouette that draped over her body like liquid moonlight. The only embellishment was a cascade of tiny diamond-like crystals scattered across one shoulder, as if she had brushed against a nebula. It was breathtaking. It was perfect. Next, Maxwell handled the logistics. He arranged for the jet, the pilots, and a gleaming black Rolls-Royce Phantom to be waiting at the private airfield near Blackwood Manor. Subtlety in motion, he called it. Are you sure you want to do this? Aurora asked him one evening as they sat on her balcony sharing a bottle of wine. A sliver of doubt had crept in. It's your time, your resources. It's my baggage. Maxwell took her hand, his thumb stroking her knuckles. Let me tell you something about my world, Aurora. It's filled with people who want something from me. My money, my connections, my name. It's a constant transaction. With you, it's different. You want my time. You want my heart. You let me into your world, your baggage included. Helping you close this chapter isn't a chore. It's a privilege. Besides, he added with a wink, I've always wanted to see a narcissist's face when his carefully constructed reality implodes. I'll bring popcorn. His unwavering support was her armor. With him by her side, she felt invincible. The day before the wedding, a package arrived for her. It was a small, velvet box from Maxwell. Inside, nestled on a bed of satin, was a necklace. It was a single, impossibly large, pear-cut sapphire suspended from a delicate platinum chain. It was the exact shade of her dress. Her breath caught. It was a museum-quality piece. Maxwell, this is too much. He called her the moment he knew she'd received it. It's not too much, he said, his voice warm. It's a reminder. That man gave you costume jewelry and empty promises. I just wanted you to wear a piece of the sky. On the morning of October 12th, Aurora woke up, not with the familiar dread, but with a strange electric calm. There was no sadness, no painful nostalgia. It was just a date. A day for a new memory to be forged. She spent the morning at her office, signing off on the Dubai project drafts. Her focus was sharp, her mind clear. She was Aurora Monroe, CEO of a thriving company. Declan Peterson was a footnote from a previous chapter. By late afternoon, the transformation began. A hair and makeup artist recommended by Isabella worked silently and efficiently. Her hair was swept up into a sleek, intricate chignon. Her makeup was understated but striking, emphasizing her eyes, making them look like polished obsidian. When she finally slipped into the midnight blue gown, she hardly recognized the woman in the mirror. This was not the girl who had married Declan Peterson. This was not the woman who had crumbled when he left. This was someone else entirely. Someone forged in fire. Maxwell arrived looking impossibly handsome in a bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo. He stopped dead in the doorway, his eyes sweeping over her. Aurora, he breathed, his voice filled with genuine awe. You are transcendent. He held out his hand, and as she took it, he fastened the sapphire necklace around her neck. The cool weight of it against her skin was a final click of a lock sealing her resolve. Ready to go? He asked. She took a deep breath, meeting his gaze in the mirror. Ready. The flight to Teterboro was silent and swift. As they boarded the Gulf Stream, the sheer scale of the moment hit her. The cabin was larger than her first apartment, all cream leather and polished mahogany. The flight attendant offered them champagne. As the jet engines spooled up with a powerful rising whine, Aurora looked out the window at the setting sun, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. She thought of Declan down on the ground, probably adjusting his tie, basking in the adoration of his guests, completely oblivious. He thought he was the ship meant for the open sea. He had no idea a hurricane was coming. Blackwood Manor was exactly as Aurora had pictured it, a sprawling Tudor-style estate that tried very hard to project an air of old-world aristocracy. Manicured lawns, ivy-covered stone walls, and a long, winding driveway lined with ancient oak trees. As the Rolls-Royce Phantom glided silently up the drive, Aurora could see the main house ablaze with light the cheerful sounds of a string quartet drifting through the crisp autumn air. Guests in their finest attire mingled on the flagstone patio, champagne flutes in hand. It was a scene of carefully curated elegance, tasteful, expensive, and utterly predictable. The wedding ceremony was scheduled for 5:30 p.m. Just as the sun began to set, Maxwell had timed their arrival for 6:15 p.m., perfectly positioned to intercept the post-ceremony, pre-reception cocktail hour. It was the moment of maximum social visibility. Their approach, however, had begun 10 minutes earlier. The first sign that something was amiss in the world of Blackwood Manor was a sound. It started as a low, distant hum, a vibration felt more than heard. It wasn't the familiar thwump-thwump of a helicopter, but a deeper, more powerful roar that seemed to come from the sky itself. The string quartet faltered mid-Mozart. Guests paused their conversations, tilting their heads, their brows furrowed in confusion. The sound grew swelling from a hum to a full-throated roar that rattled the antique window panes and vibrated through the soles of their expensive shoes. It was the sound of pure, unadulterated power. Heads turned, eyes scanning the darkening sky. And then they saw it. Banking gracefully over the Hudson River Valley, its landing lights cutting through the twilight, was the sleek, unmistakable shape of a Gulfstream G700. It was impossibly large, impossibly close. It flew with a majestic, predatory grace, its silver fuselage catching the last rays of the setting sun. It was so out of context for this quiet, bucolic setting that it felt like a scene from a movie. The jet didn't land at the manor, of course. It continued its elegant descent towards the private airfield a few miles away, its thunderous passage a herald of something to come. The whispers started immediately. What on earth was that? Did you see the size of it? Whose jet is that? Does someone here know the president? Inside the main hall, Declan Peterson was at the peak of his glory. He had just exchanged vows with Sophie Miller. He was now officially connected to one of New York's wealthiest families. His financial troubles were a thing of the past. He stood with his new wife, his hand possessively on the small of her back, accepting congratulations. His mother, Margaret Peterson, a woman with a perpetually pinched face and disapproving eyes, hovered nearby, beaming with pride for the first time in years. Such a wonderful ceremony, Declan, a guest gushed. And Sophie, you look radiant. Declan's smile was wide and practiced. Thank you. We're just so thrilled to start our life together. It's a new beginning, a real ascent. He loved that word. Ascent. It was then that the low growl of a high-performance engine replaced the fading roar of the jet. The Rolls-Royce Phantom, black as a starless night, pulled to a stop at the manor's grand entrance. It was a vehicle that commanded attention, not through noise, but through its sheer imposing presence. A valet, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and panic, scrambled to open the passenger door. The first thing the guests on the patio saw was a leg, long, elegant, clad in a sheer stocking, and ending in a stiletto that looked like it was carved from obsidian. Then Aurora Monroe emerged. A collective, hushed intake of breath seemed to suck the air from the patio. She rose from the car, not like a person, but like an event. The midnight blue gown flowed around her, the crystals on her shoulder glittering like a captured constellation. The sapphire at her throat was a point of deep, cold fire. Her hair was a sculpted masterpiece, her face serene and unreadable. She didn't look angry or vengeful. She looked like she was bored with gods. She paused for a moment, her eyes scanning the stunned crowd with a look of cool, mild appraisal. Then Maxwell stepped out from the other side. If Aurora was the queen of the night, he was her king. The Tom Ford tuxedo fit him like a second skin. He radiated an aura of quiet, unassailable confidence. He wasn't handsome in the flashy, desperate way Declan was. He was handsome in the way a mountain is handsome, solid, timeless, and powerful. He walked to Aurora's side and offered her his arm, his movements economical and precise. Together, they looked less like wedding guests and more like they had arrived to purchase the entire estate as a weekend getaway. The whispers on the patio turned into frantic, urgent murmurs. "Is that Aurora Declan's ex-wife? My God, I didn't even recognize her. Who is that with her? He looks important. That dress, that necklace must have cost more than the wedding." Declan had just raised a glass of champagne to his lips when he saw the commotion at the door. He turned, a slight annoyance on his face, expecting a late-arriving cousin. His eyes fell on the couple framed in the grand entryway. The champagne flute slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor with a sound that seemed deafeningly loud in the sudden silence. The blood drained from his face, leaving behind a sickly, pale mask. His jaw went slack. It was a total system failure. His mind simply could not process the data it was receiving. Aurora, that was Aurora, the comfortable, mousy anchor of a woman he had so righteously discarded. And who the hell was the man with her who looked like he could buy and sell everyone in the room? Before his first drink was finished, Sophie, his new bride, followed his gaze. "Declan, darling, what is it?" Her eyes landed on Aurora. A flicker of confusion, then recognition, then a gathering storm of feminine indignation. What is she doing here? Aurora and Maxwell began to move, gliding through the parted sea of guests with an unhurried grace. They weren't crashing. They were gracing the event with their presence. Aurora's eyes finally found Declan's across the crowded room. She gave him a small, polite smile, a smile one might give to a vaguely familiar waiter. They reached the shell-shocked groom, the broken glass crunching under Maxwell's impeccable shoes. Ignoring the furious glare of the bride and the horrified gasp of her new mother-in-law, Aurora stopped directly in front of her ex-husband. She tilted her head, her expression one of pleasant curiosity. "Declan," she said, her voice calm and clear, cutting through the silence of the room. "What a lovely party. You should have told me you were having one." The silence that followed Aurora's words was thick and heavy, broken only by the frantic internal calculations happening behind Declan's eyes. He looked from Aurora's impossibly serene face to Maxwell's cool, observant gaze, and then back to the shattered champagne flute at his feet. It was a perfect metaphor for his state of mind. His first instinct was aggression, the cornered animal's response. "Aurora, what the hell are you doing here? You weren't invited." His voice was louder than he intended, a raw, panicked edge to it. Aurora raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Oh, I must have been mistaken." She feigned a look at the invitation she wasn't holding. "My apologies. We were in the neighborhood and saw the lights. We can certainly leave if we're intruding." It was a masterful stroke. She was offering him an out, a way to de-escalate, but it was an out that required him to publicly ask her to leave her who looked like a goddess, accompanied by a man who radiated influence. To do so would make him look petty and insecure. Maxwell, who hadn't said a word, simply watched Declan, his expression unreadable, but his presence immense. He was a silent checkmate on the board. Sophie, the bride, had no such compunctions. "I think you should," she hissed, stepping forward. Her white dress was a stark contrast to Aurora's dark silk. "This is my wedding day. You have no right to be here." Aurora finally turned her gaze to Sophie, and for the first time, A flicker of something not pity, but perhaps a detached empathy, entered her eyes. "Sophie, isn't it congratulations? He's all yours." The words were simple, but the delivery was devastating. She said it with the weary magnanimity of someone giving away a used piece of furniture. The insult was so subtle, so elegantly delivered, that Sophie was left momentarily speechless, unsure of how to even process it. Before Declan could muster a coherent response, his mother, Margaret Peterson, swooped in. Margaret had spent years perfecting her particular brand of condescending disapproval, and she had always directed the full force of it at Aurora. "Aurora, I knew you had no class, but this is a new low." Margaret spat, her voice a venomous whisper. "To show up here trying to ruin your ex-husband's happiness, it's pathetic." This was the moment Aurora had dreaded, the confrontation with the woman who had made her feel inadequate for a decade. But the old fear was gone, replaced by a crystalline clarity. "Hello, Margaret." Aurora said, her tone even and cool. "You look well." Anger is clearly a preservative. She glanced at Maxwell. "Darling, this is Margaret Peterson, Declan's mother. She was instrumental in the success of our marriage." Maxwell extended a hand. "A pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Peterson." Maxwell Lancaster. The name landed in the charged atmosphere like a dropped anvil. Lancaster, as in Lancaster Aerospace, as in Lancaster Innovations, as in one of the 10 richest self-made men under 40 in the world. Even Margaret, in her bubble of suburban snobbery, knew that name. Her jaw, which had been set in a line of righteous fury, went slack. Her eyes widened, flicking from Maxwell's hand to his face, and then to Aurora, who was now linked with him. The equation did not compute. Margaret's hand, which had been clenched at her side, weakly rose and shook Maxwell's. Mr. Lancaster, I don't understand." "Aurora and I are together," Maxwell stated simply, leaving no room for doubt. He then turned his gaze back to Declan. "Peterson, we don't want to cause a scene. We were simply passing by. Perhaps my fiancé and I could have a celebratory drink with the happy couple and be on our way, fiancé." The word detonated in the center of the room. Aurora felt Maxwell squeeze her arm gently. They had discussed this. It was the final, unassailable piece of the narrative. She wasn't just dating a billionaire, she was marrying him. The sapphire around her neck wasn't just a gift, it was a promise. Declan stared his face, a kaleidoscope of shocked jealousy and pure, unadulterated rage. Fiancé, the woman he had cast off as dead weight, was engaged to Maxwell Lancaster. It was a cosmic injustice. It defied the laws of the universe as he understood them, a universe that was supposed to revolve around him. The guests, who had been trying their best to pretend they weren't listening, were now abuzz with the revelation. The story was rewriting itself in real time. This wasn't a pathetic ex trying to spoil a wedding. This was a phoenix, risen from ashes Declan didn't even know he'd created, arriving with a dragon in tow. Trapped Declan had no choice but to play the gracious host. Of course, he choked out, forcing a smile that was more of a grimace. Let's all have a drink." He led them towards a small private study off the main hall, away from the prying eyes of the guests. The four of them, a groom in turmoil, a furious bride, a serene ex-wife, and her billionaire fiancé, entered the room. The air was thick with unspoken history and imminent conflict. Declan poured himself a large scotch and downed half of it in one gulp. He finally found his voice, a low accusatory growl directed at Aurora. "This is a game to you, isn't it? Showing up like this with him. He gestured dismissively at Maxwell. To rub my face in it. Your face, Aurora asked, genuinely curious. Declan, why would you assume my life still revolves around you? I came here tonight to close a door. You chose to have your wedding on October 12th. You must have known I'd see the invitation. Did you expect me to sit at home and cry? Is that the role you assigned me? I expected you to have some decency, he shot back. And was it decent to tell me I was an anchor? She replied, her voice dropping, losing its public coolness, and taking on a sharper, more personal edge. Was it decent to dismantle my self-worth so you could walk away guilt-free? I spent years believing you, Declan. Believing I was the reason you weren't soaring. It was the truth he insisted, his desperation making him reckless. Look at you now. You only manage this. He waved a hand at her dress, her necklace, because you latched onto someone richer. It's the same thing. You're just a more expensive anchor now. It was a fatal mistake. The insult was so crude, so revealing of his own transactional worldview that it hung in the air, ugly and pathetic. Before Aurora could even respond, Maxwell stepped forward slightly. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Mr. Peterson Maxwell began his voice a quiet, lethal calm. You seem to be under a few misapprehensions. When I met Aurora, she was already the CEO of a multi-million-dollar design firm that she built from the ground up with her own talent and grit. She had already secured the Dubai contracts that I assure you are worth more than this entire estate. I am not the source of her success. I am merely the man lucky enough to be by her side. You, on the other hand. Maxwell paused, letting the silence stretch. He gave Declan a slow, deliberate, head-to-toe look of appraisal, the kind one gives to a faulty piece of equipment. I've seen your file, Maxwell continued, his voice dropping even lower. When Aurora mentioned your name, my security team did a routine background check. It's standard procedure for anyone who enters our lives. The debt from your failed crypto ventures, the margin calls you barely met by borrowing against your parents' retirement fund. Your ascent in finance seems to have been more of a free fall. Declan's face went from pale to ashen. He looked like he'd been physically struck. You have no right. Don't talk to me about rights. Maxwell cut him off, the steel in his voice, now unmistakable. You left a woman like Aurora, and you tried to break her spirit on the way out. Now you stand here in a suit, probably paid for by your father-in-law, in a venue paid for by your father-in-law, about to accept a job you didn't earn from your father-in-law, and you have the audacity to call her an anchor. Every word was a perfectly aimed shot. Sophie, who had been watching with righteous anger, now had a flicker of confusion and doubt in her eyes. She looked at Declan, then at Maxwell, then back at Declan, searching his face for a denial. She found none. She only saw the panicked, guilty sweat beading on his forehead. The first crack in the facade of her perfect king had appeared, and it was starting to spread. The silence in the study was no longer just tense. It was suffocating. Maxwell's words hung in the air, each one a damning indictment that stripped away Declan's carefully constructed persona. Declan stood exposed not as a titan of industry, but as a desperate man in a rented suit. Sophie was the first to break the silence. Her voice was small, uncertain, a stark contrast to her earlier fury. Declan, what is he talking about? What debt? Declan rounded on her, his panic curdling into desperate anger. He's lying. Sophie, can't you see what this is? She's brought him here to ruin our day, to plant these lies. But his denial was weak, his eyes shifty. He couldn't meet her gaze. He couldn't meet anyone's. Aurora watched him, a strange sense of detachment washing over her. The anger she had held on to for so long was dissolving, replaced by a cold, clear pity. He wasn't the formidable man who had crushed her spirit. He was just a boy in a man's body, terrified of being found out. "It's not a lie, is it, Declan?" she said softly. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of fact. "I remember the late nights, the frantic phone calls you tried to hide. I remember you selling off the stocks my grandfather left me, telling me it was for a guaranteed investment. I just never put it all together. I believed you when you said it was my fault, that my lack of vision was stressing you out." She took a step closer, her voice remaining low and steady, a stark contrast to his unraveling composure. "The story you told me about me being an anchor, that was never the truth. The truth is your ship was already sinking, wasn't it? You weren't cutting an anchor. You were jumping onto the nearest lifeboat." She glanced at Sophie, whose hand had flown to her mouth, her eyes wide with dawning horror. The lifeboat had a name. "No," Declan snarled, cornered. He turned back to Aurora, his face contorted with a venomous resentment. "You want to talk about the truth? You were never satisfied. You were always pushing your little design business, your little projects. You should have been supporting me, my vision. If you had just been the wife I needed, none of this would have happened." It was his last, desperate gambit, blame the victim. But the words, once so powerful, were now hollow and pathetic. Maxwell let out a short, mirthless laugh. "The wife you needed? You mean the financier you didn't have? Mrs. Peterson," he said, turning his attention briefly to Margaret, who was frozen by the door, her face a mask of disbelief. "You must be proud." But the final devastating blow didn't come from Maxwell or Aurora. It came from Sophie. Her initial shock had hardened into a cold, terrifying clarity. The little inconsistencies she had overlooked, the vague answers Declan gave about his business, his eagerness to have her father handle all their finances, it all clicked into place. The man she had just married wasn't a king building an empire. He was a refugee seeking asylum from his own failures. "My father," Sophie said, her voice trembling but clear. "The vice president position at his firm. The one he offered you as a wedding gift. Was that part of the deal, Declan?" Declan's face crumpled. The fight went out of him, replaced by a desperate, pleading look. "Sophie, baby, listen to me. It wasn't like that. I love you. I fell in love with you and your father just... He saw my potential. He wanted to help." "Help you?" Sophie's voice rose, laced with hysteria. "Help you by paying off your debts? Was that it was I, the bailout package? Was our marriage a business transaction?" "No, of course not," he pleaded, reaching for her. She recoiled as if his touch were toxic. "Don't lie to me. Not anymore." Tears streamed down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. That jet that flew over here, all those whispers from the guests, they were all looking at me, pitying me, the stupid rich girl who bought herself a husband. The raw, ugly truth of her words hung in the air. Declan had no response. His silence was a confession. This was the moment Aurora had unknowingly been waiting for. Not a moment of revenge, but of complete and utter vindication. It wasn't about her being better off. It was about the fundamental lie of their breakup being exposed. She hadn't failed him. He had failed himself, and he had used her as a scapegoat. With a quiet grace, she turned to leave. Her purpose there was finished. The door was not just closed, it was sealed, the lock turned, the key dissolved. As she reached the door, she paused beside the sobbing bride. For a moment, she saw not the snooty socialite, but another woman who had been deceived by Declan's charm. On impulse, she spoke, her voice devoid of triumph, filled only with a quiet finality. "For what it's worth," Aurora said, "I don't think you're stupid. I think you just believed him. I did too, for a very long time." Sophie looked up, her tear-filled eyes meeting Aurora's. In that moment, there was a flash of understanding between two women who had occupied the same space in a man's dishonest world. Then Aurora and Maxwell were gone, stepping out of the suffocating study and back into the main hall. The string quartet had resumed, playing a brave but futile attempt to restore normalcy. But the atmosphere was irrevocably changed. The guests fell silent again as Aurora and Maxwell passed their expressions, a mixture of awe, pity, and frantic excitement. They were witnesses to a legend in the making. They didn't look back as they exited the manor. They didn't need to hear the shouting that erupted from the study. They didn't need to see Sophie rip the veil from her hair, or see Declan's mother finally comprehending the monumental fraud her son had perpetrated. As the Rolls-Royce pulled away from Blackwood Manor, Aurora looked at its reflection in the side mirror. A house of lies, ablaze with light, beginning to crumble from the inside out. She felt no joy, no schadenfreude. She just felt light. The anchor wasn't him. It had been the story he'd made her believe, and now she was free of it. The ride back to the private airfield was silent, but it was a comfortable, shared silence. Aurora leaned her head against the plush leather of the Rolls-Royce, the lights of passing cars painting fleeting patterns across Maxwell's stoic profile. The adrenaline was beginning to subside, leaving in its wake a profound and bone-deep sense of peace. The G700 was waiting for them on the tarmac, a beacon of otherworldly power in the quiet darkness of the countryside. As they ascended the stairs and the cabin door sealed shut, with a soft hiss, it felt like they were leaving the entire messy terrestrial world behind. Once airborne, the lights of the Hudson Valley spread out below them like a carpet of scattered diamonds. Aurora could just make out a cluster of lights that was Blackwood Manor, a tiny, insignificant speck in the vast darkness. "Are you okay?" Maxwell asked, his hand covering hers. "I am," she said, and she was surprised by the depth of her own sincerity. "I'm better than okay. For 2 years, I've been carrying this weight, this narrative that I was less than, that I wasn't enough. I thought seeing him again would hurt. I thought seeing him happy would break me." She looked out the window at the shrinking lights below. "But he wasn't happy, he was terrified, and I wasn't broken. I was free." She turned to him, her eyes shining with unshed tears, but they were not tears of sadness. "Thank you, Maxwell. Not for the jet, or the dress, or the necklace. Thank you for giving me the support to go back there and find myself again." He brought her hand to his lips. "I didn't give you anything you didn't already have, Aurora. I just cleared the runway." They didn't talk about Declan for the rest of the flight. They talked about the future. They planned a trip to Kyoto to see the cherry blossoms in the spring. He told her about a new philanthropic foundation he was starting for STEM education for girls, and her eyes lit up as she immediately started sketching ideas for the foundation's headquarters on a cocktail napkin. They were two people building something real, looking forward, not back. The aftermath of their visit to Blackwood Manor became the stuff of legend in New York society circles. The story pieced together from the whispers of guests and the loud, furious arguments that followed their departure spread like wildfire. The wedding, for all intents and purposes, ended the moment Aurora and Maxwell left. Sophie Miller, in a spectacular display of wrath, had called her father from the study. The conversation was reportedly short, and brutally effective. The vice president position was rescinded. The financial safety net was yanked away. The marriage, not even 3 hours old, was over. Sophie left with her parents that night, leaving a humiliated Declan to face his stunned guests and his aghast mother alone in the monument to his failed ambitions. The annulment was swift and merciless. A few weeks later, Aurora saw a small piece in a business gossip column. Declan Peterson had been forced to declare bankruptcy. His parents had sold their home to cover the debts he had accrued against it. He had fallen from a height that had only ever existed in his own imagination. Aurora felt nothing. It was like reading about a stranger. One crisp December evening, she and Maxwell were walking through Central Park. Snow had just begun to fall, dusting the trees and muffling the sounds of the city. They stopped on the Bow Bridge, the same spot where Declan had proposed to her a lifetime ago. She had once avoided this place, this ghost-filled landmark of her past. But tonight, standing here with Maxwell's arm wrapped around her, the cold air on her cheeks, it was just a bridge. A beautiful bridge in a beautiful city. "You know," she said, looking at the soft flakes landing on his coat. "He proposed to me here." Maxwell looked at her, his expression gentle. "Does it bother you to be here?" She shook her head, a genuine smile on her face. "No, it's just a memory, and it's not the most important one I have of this place anymore." He smiled back, pulling her closer. "Good, because I was hoping to make a new one." And there, on the same spot where her old life had been promised, Maxwell Lancaster got down on one knee in the falling snow and asked Aurora Monroe to be his wife. This time, there were no illusions, no empires, no grand ambitions. There was just a man and a woman grounded in truth, love, and a respect so deep it was the foundation of their world. She said yes, of course. Her answer was as quiet and sure as the falling snow, a promise of a future that wasn't about ascending, but about being truly, deeply, and unshakably home. Aurora's story isn't just about a dramatic wedding crash. It's about rewriting your own narrative. It's about realizing that the people who try to define you are often just projecting their own failures and insecurities. She didn't need a billionaire or a private jet to be powerful. She already was. The grand entrance was just her finally choosing to see herself the way the world was about to. Her real victory wasn't Declan's downfall, but her own liberation from a story that was never truly hers. What did you think of Aurora's ultimate power move? Have you ever had a moment where you had to take back your own story from someone else? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If this story of strength and vindication resonated with you, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs to hear that their past does not define them, and make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. You won't want to miss the next real-life drama we have in store.